ladies and gentlemen. Now let's start with international speakers here coming from all over the world. We start with people from Switzerland. We have here Mr. Adrian Leuenberger. He had several executive board positions in banks in Switzerland and Luxembourg, taking care of emerging markets. Then he focused on structuring and closing private equity transactions across Sub-Sahara African countries. He covered various different industries, ranging from agriculture to hospitality, healthcare, infrastructure to mining. With his creative skills in structuring highly complex transactions, Adrian has gained a deep understanding of conducting successful ventures in the Sub-Sahara Africa markets. Therefore, he is coming and talking today about the art of investing in Africa. Adrian Leuenberger, please.
Thank you, Stefan. Hi, everyone. You just shaved off 2 minutes of my 10 minutes presentation here with the introduction. And another thing is this picture, it's really me, although this is about 20 years old, I think, but it is me. No, looking back of a career of nearly 30 years investing and also recently deploying about $500 million of direct investments in Sub-Saharan Africa. One thing I have to say, though, I lost money. So I cannot say that I've done only deals that I made money, unfortunately. I think, but losing money and losing deals is actually something that didn't make me smarter, but it made me wiser. And I think you learn from mistakes. I think that's really what it comes down to. Now, today I'm going to talk about two things. First, a little bit about the art of investing in general, not specifically on Africa, and then actually focusing a little bit of Africa. But the reason I've chosen that, I'm not originally a deal maker, a finance person, but I realized over time that financing is not just talking to lawyers. Actually, the more lawyers you have involved, the more difficult it gets. It's not just having accountants in place. It's really trying to come up with a very creative way to create a so-called win-win solution. What is creative investing? Creative investing is what I said is you're not just going to talk to lawyers, talk to accountants, and suddenly you realize after negotiation that you're not even quite sure you want to do the deal. And I've seen this over and over again. So in terms to be successful in investing, you have to have one thing in mind. You need to make sure you want the deal. And you make sure that all your team want the deal. I've seen so many cases where you have a very strong top manager or owner. He wants something, all his people basically make it happen, but nobody really believes it. So for me, the key is really make sure you really want it. Make sure you really want the deal. The second part, really, I think I have a loud voice. I think it works. And the second part is also, you need to understand who you're dealing with. You need to understand the stakeholders, who's actually involved in it. Third point, it's not about winning. Making a deal, whether it's creative or not creative, it's not about winning. If you want to make a deal because you want to win, you lose your money. Because you want to make sure that you create a so-called win-win situation. The seller, the buyer, all the people involved, if they feel good, then you're very successful. If the seller feels bad afterwards, believe me, you have an ending for a lifetime. You will not be happy. Also, don't take shortcuts, for heaven's sake. I mean, there's one thing I've seen. I said cut out the lawyers. You need them as well. But take your time, be patient. Before I talk about Africa, let me just use a couple of examples that are not necessarily specific to Africa, but they show how creative one can really be. One thing is a deal that I was heavily involved in, and actually there's even a Harvard case study about that, which I'm proud of. I'm not going to distribute it. But there was a time when I had quite a famous artist. He came to me, or to the bank I represented, and said, listen, I need 20 million. I want to make a big art exhibition. Can you give me 20 million? And that's a typical thing as a bank. You look at that and you said, well, what are you going to give me for this 20 million? He said, well, I have a lot of art. I will give you the art, so in case the whole thing fails, you can keep the art. And a typical bank says, well, believe me, even if you give me a Picasso, this is not what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a problem with my balance sheet. But the creative thing here is defining a win-win situation. We went to a lot of clients the bank had. The clients knew this artist. And we went to the clients and said, listen, can we pledge your account so we give this artist a loan from your account? And what you can do is, you can select pieces of art from his collection as collateral. And these pieces of art are 3 times the value of the money he pledged. So we created a situation where all the clients wanted the artist to fail, so he couldn't pay back the loan. So they could actually get the art. Now, that doesn't happen. He basically, believe me, he was very successful, but these people who participated, they got LIBOR plus 5 basis points, which is not so bad. In addition to that, what they got the possibility to meet the artist and also to buy a contemporary piece of art at 50% discount of the market value. So we created a win-win situation. The only loser was the bank, because we didn't earn only money on it, but we created an interesting case. Now, the second thing is specifically now for Africa. A couple of years ago, we had a situation that I mentioned, I deployed about 500 million of money, above 500 million in Sub-Sahara Africa. We encountered a case where we wanted to buy a fairly large real estate in Africa. Now, typical case, the buyer wanted, and you stick with numbers now, but we looked at the same dimension. The buyer wanted 150 million, and we wanted to pay 100 million. So we had a big difference of 50 million. After the team was negotiating with lawyers, everything, and they came back for a meeting in London and said, well, we made a deal at 120 million, we're proud. So, right before the deal was concluded, the decision was done, no one's going to pay 100. Not even 1 cent more. And the buyer came back and said 115. We said, that's it. So we had a big meeting, and the buyer was there, the seller was there, and I happened to be there as well. And no conclusion, nothing. So a lot of loss of face problems. And afterwards I went to the CFO of the buyer, a big organization, and said, listen, how about this? We pay you 80 million. You give me a 20 million loan for 5 years at 15%. And he was a financial guy. He looked at me and said, Adrian, that's interesting. So basically in 5 years I have 150 million. Yeah. And I said, well, I can go to our investment committee and tell them, I made you at 80 million. Of course, with 20 million loans. To make a long story short, the deal was concluded. So the seller, he got his 150 million, and interest rate in US dollars purchase year anyway, so this made a big difference. And also as a buyer, you know, the transaction was concluded, and we could say we got a good deal. So we created a win-win situation for the buyer and the seller. In addition to that, we managed to get a good asset. Just a couple of examples. Now, let me just move to the second part quickly. It's really investing in, I call this challenging jurisdiction. Specifically also Africa. But again, I don't like the fact when people say, we are investing in Africa, because there are 50 countries in Africa. And believe me, every one of these countries is totally different. The same also applies for Asia. There are roughly about 50 countries in Asia. And you don't invest in Asia, you invest in China and Japan. They're all different. Same applies for Europe to a certain degree, and it just happens to be also about 50 countries in Europe. Now, one thing that I've always heard, specifically on Africa is different in terms of investment. By the way, it's different. The fact is, it's not. On the technical side, investing in Africa is the same as you invest in the United States or in London. Everywhere it's the same. So whenever somebody tells you Africa is different, it's not correct. On the technical side, doing a deal, it is the same. What's different is you need to have much more knowledge of the culture, of the situation. You need to know your environment extremely well. You need to know who are the stakeholders, and not just who is the buyer or who is the producer, who the investor. You need to know a lot of stakeholders. We once had a deal where we wanted to build a production facility in one of the Sub-Saharan African countries. It was an absolutely slam dunk. It was consumer goods, the country needed it, it was really fantastic. I guess I really need it, huh? I just don't like these things. And it really made sense, financially, everything. what we found out that one of the big politicians, his son, happened to be the major importer of that product. So we had a problem. Even if you establish a production facility, you produce, you probably will not sell anything, because one of the stakeholders had a vested interest for you not to do it. And that's what I'm talking about, difficult jurisdiction. You really need to understand who you're talking to. The next thing is, of course, the political environment. You don't want to invest into a country where there is a potential shift in the political leadership in the coming 1 or 2 years. Unfortunately, in some cases, you don't know whether it's coming or not. But this is also a matter of the risk you take. You need to know roughly, if you do an investment, if you buy a deal, who actually will win, who actually will lose. I said you should always create win-win situations, but the reality is somebody always loses. So you need to know who that is. And in some cases, you may actually not do a transaction because the wrong person may lose. And then you have a problem going forward. In my experience, if you do investments in Sub-Saharan Africa, you need a partner. Doing it alone, especially doing it, for example, out of London, in the offices of a lawyer, trying to do a transaction, and then maybe not even go and look at it, really, you're going to fail. You need somebody on the ground. You need a trusted partner. You need somebody you can talk to, somebody who understands the dynamics. Without doing that, I would not advise of actually investing. Last but not least, that also brings me to the last slide. It's a little bit, it sounds academic, but it's not. Risk assessment. It's not at the point of making a decision to invest. That's what happens right now. You have all these analysts, we make this nice analysis, SWOT and whatever there is, and they come up with a risk and say, well, the risk is high, but the reward is fantastic. It has to be a dynamic process. If I talk about dynamic process, you need to have clear, identified the key parameters of what you're looking at. Its stakeholders, its product, its markets, etc. Yes, before you invest, you have to make a clear analysis of all these parameters. But then you have to continuously looking at all these risk factors on a regular basis through informal, formal measures, talking to people. You have to continuously adjust your risk parameters. By doing that, you can actually act like a chess player, and that's the reason I've chosen this format here. For me, making deal and the art of dealing is like being a chess player. You think ahead, you anticipate, you build up defenses, you take action, and especially the most important thing, at least in my experience, you don't ignore potential problems. And this is unfortunately a phenomena, not just in investing, it's just ignoring that something is going wrong. And I come back to what I said early on, telling your boss or telling the capital or the limited partner that everything is good, although you already know it's not going well. If you follow these couple of points, especially in difficult jurisdictions such as Africa, I think you can be more successful, but don't expect to be successful 100% of times. I think that is just not realistic. That pretty much concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I all wish you a nice remainder of the day. Thank you.